Welcome to a very, very special Blue Room Weekly. It's the last weekly that we do on the Blue Room before our emotional game against Southampton this Sunday. We're recording on Thursday night, and it's a bit of a special show because what we're doing tonight, we're going to do it a bit differently. We're calling it the Goodison Awards. So what I've done, I've created some categories and some nominations for some of the greatest things we can talk about our wonderful old ground. And joining me at the moment, I've got Les and I've got Keith with me, and hopefully some more of the Blue Room regulars will be joining us as we go along. So first of all, I'm going to get straight into it, lads, because I want to get later on everyone, hopefully more people join us along the way, but I want to get everyone's recollections and feelings about Goodison. But I'm just going to read out the categories we've got for tonight. We've got best goal, best derby, best game, best stand, which I think is going to be a highly contentious conversation. Weirdest moment, best celebrity fan, best kit, and best crowd shout. So they're the categories, and then I've got a load of nominations to go with them. So I'm going to start with the first category, and that is best goal. So I'm going to read you out, Les and Keith, the nominations for best goal. So we've got Leon Osman versus Larissa in 2007, Wayne Rooney versus Arsenal in 2002, McFadden versus Charlton in 2007, Barry Horne versus Wimbledon in 94, Andy Gray versus Sunderland in 1985, Bob Latchford versus Chelsea in 1978, and Alan Ball versus Newcastle in 1971. I've purposely left out all derby goals because obviously that's a category in itself. Mm-hmm. But just from those nominations, Les, anything that stand out immediately to you, or anyone that you remember fondly?
Yeah, if it was like a knobhead on a quiz show now, I'd be like, oh, a couple of these are a bit before my time. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think for me, the standout one is Barry Horne v Wimbledon, just because not only was it like a spectacular goal, it was just so important for the survival of the club, really, because it was one of those relegation scraps where, as they've all been, if we've gone down, it felt like oblivion. But just to pick up on, because I'm the oldest here, just to pick up on the three really old ones, Ball v Newcastle has a very famous goal. I think it was his last goal for Everton, where he picks it up just outside the street end, hits it top corner, flies in, looks lovely. It's in that sort of grainy colour footage when you see it, isn't it?
It's just when colour TV hits the UK, isn't it? And it's that wonderful video or wonderful image of him with his, obviously his fiery red hair and then white boots. And yeah, I just think it's one of them, like, it's all before our times, but you get the feeling watching it. When we talk about heritage and history, that goal epitomises that for me.
Yeah, and Latchford, obviously, that was his 30th. In the season, he scored 30. And Gray v Sunderland, that was from Peter Reid's cross, the diving header.
Well, do you know what? I'm thinking about it now. I probably should have put Trevor Stevens' goal in because the ball from Bracewell was unbelievable. Well. And it was a better goal. However, I've put Gray's in just for the commentary alone. Reid's cross Gray. I mean, that is embedded and imprinted on Evertonian minds, especially fans from that era. So I think, that's probably, I think Andy Gray himself will concede that he didn't score the best goal on the day on that one. Keith?
Just quickly, one more, just on Rooney as well. One goal I love is his goal against West Ham. I think that is possibly the best goal I've seen live.
Do you know what? I was tempted to put it in, but the only reason I didn't... Yeah, the only reason, and there is going to be room, by the way, on each of these categories for us to, offer your own. These are just things that I've come up with, and the course is going to be ones to offer your own. But I think I left that out because it was tinged with the fact that, as much as it was nice to have Rooney back, he wasn't the same, was he, as when we had him, Rooney part one.
That was such a big goal as well.
That was it, Keith. That goal against Arsenal. I mean, I know we know so much about Wayne Rooney now, but at that time, people forget. He was just this kid who we'd all heard of since he was about 14 years of age. And he was ours. He was Everton's. And we hadn't had anything like it. And we were waiting. And Moyes was really careful with him, only playing him sort of the last 10, 15 minutes of games. And I think if I remember rightly, Arsenal had one of their, as they did during that time, in the 2000s, one of their mad runs where they hadn't lost for 30 games. And we broke that streak. And it was that goal which he just announced them on the scene. And it was at the time, you just thought, thank God he's ours. And then, it was just wonderful to have a player like that at our disposal at that time.
Yeah, 100%.
It was just an absolutely obscene moment of cheek, wasn't it? I mean, you look at it, a 16-year-old kid playing like in the men's game against one of the best teams in the country, against at the time probably the best goalkeeper in the country, and he just went, do you know what? Nah, 30 yards, I'm gonna have a pop, and he's like postage stamped it. I seen an interview with him the other day when he was talking about it, and he was saying like how in the tunnel before the game he was stood next to all these absolute units, and at the time he was a big lad when he was a teenager. He was a strong boy, but he still wasn't like fully come to manhood. And he said he's in the tunnel there next to the likes of Patrick Vieira, Emmanuel Petit, and that all like big lads. And he's sort of looking up at them, and go, "Oh, bloody hell, this is it. This is the big time." And then he gets on and does that. It's just mental.
Yeah, it was just an unreal day and an unreal goal. And I always remember hearing, the crowds and everyone chanting Rooney. It was just like, oh my God, this 16-year-old kid. At the time as well, Rooney's about 14 months older than me. So at the time, for me personally, it was like, oh my God, someone who's like me is playing for Everton. It was just outstanding.
6 months younger than me.
Yeah, it's ridiculous when you think about it now, isn't it? Les, I've thrown a couple of wild ones in there as well. McFadden against Charlton, which was just absolutely sublime. But my actual personal favourite's Osman against Larissa. I just thought it was an unbelievable team goal.
Yeah, it was. It was the back heel from Pienaar. The movements up the pitch to that point, then the back heel. And it's the way he checks his stride and he takes like 3 strides up and just goes, fuck off, and whacks it in. It's the Osman one it's a beauty. It's a great goal. Yeah. The McFadden one, for technique, it's unparalleled. That to do that on the edge of the box, like it was in injury time as well, wasn't it? Or
Charlton equalised in like the 90 or like the 89th minute or something, hadn't they?
Yeah, to do that, then to have the cool to do that and hit it on the volley as well, incredible. But yeah, I think technique wise and just sort of team play wise, I think it probably is Osman, isn't it? I think if you're just looking at the goal purely as a goal, it's probably that one. I mean, the Rooney one's got a lot in it because Dave, when we did that Goodison Generations video, which you can watch on YouTube, Dave, that was the goal that he remembers as like his favourite Goodison moment, because he said Gravison just toes it into the air, and that's when Rooney like takes it down on his toe and kills it dead, turns and hits it. So for technique, that's amazing as well. But yeah, I think technically from a team perspective, Osman, but I think I'm going to stick with Barry Horne.
Yeah, it's tough because I think that some of the more modern ones we're obviously a bit biased to because we've seen them. We've either been there in the flesh or had the advantage of having TV. For me, I'm looking at it again and I'm just finding it hard to not have Alan Ball recognised somewhere. Probably our greatest ever player, or up there certainly with one of our greatest ever players. So I think, go on, Keith.
One of my favourite things about that Alan Ball goal is I think it's when the ball breaks loose in midfield. I think it's Johnny Morrissey goes in with the most yard dog tackle you will ever see, like completely over the ball, studs at the Newcastle player's shin, trying to win it. And you can see the Newcastle player wants none of it and like shits out with the tackle. And the ball then breaks to Alan Ball, who at the time, as they said, was the greatest of them all.
Yeah, absolutely sniped it in. I think, look, I'm gonna hold court here and take the executive decision. I think Alan Ball for the purists. I think Osman's for the team goal, but I think we're going to all probably agree that it has to be the best goal that Goodison's ever seen, for its importance, for what it meant, and for really how Everton went about business in the future. Has to be Barry Horne. Agreed? There we go. So your winner of the best goal, and please feel free to interact with us and disagree with us, because I think we will have some controversial decisions made tonight. But we're going with the Blue Room best ever goal at Goodison, Barry Horne versus Wimbledon in 1994. On to our next category then. This is the best derby, and this obviously includes some goals in this, but also the games themselves. So I'll run through the categories, the nominations. Best derby then, Andy King 1-0 in 1978. The FA Cup 4-4 in 1991. Big Dunc scored in the 2-0 game, Big Joe's first game in '94. The Carsley derby during that magnificent season when we finished 4th in 2004. Johnson derby, the 3-0 at home with Pepe Reina doing us a favour at 3-0. The FA Cup tic-tac ITV goal from Cup Gosling in 2009. And I've thrown in the last ever derby at Goodison Park, last ever men's derby anyway at Goodison Park, James Tarkowski with that thunderbolt in the last kick of the game to make it 2-2. Quite cliche, Les. I'm going to do the old man Les thing and come to you first and talk about Andy King, because obviously we're all very young at the time, or we weren't, myself and Keith weren't even born at the time, but that was during a period, wasn't it, when Liverpool were dominating, and I think we'd gone. Yeah. It was some ridiculous record, wasn't it? We haven't beaten them in 14 games, or it might have even been longer than that.
Yeah, and it was a long time.
And it wasn't so much the win; it was the magnitude of that win and how we were beating the best team in the country by a mile. But not only that, what a goal in the top corner!
Yeah, it was a beauty, wasn't it? It was a funny time for Everton. I mean, I was only 1 at the time, but that sort of team around 77, 78. It was a team that just missed out on like being good and doing something. It just couldn't quite get over the line. And I think from Everton sort of winning the title in 69, 70, everyone thought that team's going to go on and dominate the 70s. Obviously didn't turn out like that. There are lots of reasons why. Lots of reasons why Everton never quite made it in the 70s. Unfortunately, Liverpool did. And they kind of adapted their style more to the 70s style of football. Very sort of defensive oriented, passing back to the keeper. Something they did for 20 years after that. So they sort of built their style on that decade, and Everton couldn't quite keep up. A few near misses, but that was huge at the time. My dad's talked about that a lot. And Andy King, he's a player who had 2 spells at the club, which I didn't realise until recently. But he came back in the early 80s. Howard Kendall signed him back, and he had a really good spell. Like scored quite a few goals in his appearances. Like was a really sort of impressive player just before that team hit greatness. I think he maybe left in '84 again. But yeah, I mean, he's a player. Fellas of a certain age and women of a certain age look at Andy King and they go all misty-eyed if you mention his name, because he was a proper hero. Bit of a Luton wide boy, bit of a character. But yeah, every Evertonian loves him. So I guess like for us, I don't know. It'd be like maybe years ago, Tim Cahill scored a winner in the derby, and we've not beaten them for like 14 games or 10 years or something like that. It'd be something like that, a player who everyone loved. So, I mean, I can't pick between these. This is so hard, this category.
Yeah. I mean, well, I think what I've tried to do with these, because the age we all are, we didn't want to make it just about the last sort of 20, 30 years. I wanted to go beyond that, because there's a lot of massive Everton moments, especially derby moments in the past, and I think Andy King is one of them that undoubtedly belongs in this. Moving on though, I mean, the next one I picked was the FA Cup 4-4. I remember getting the VHS of this, and I remember sitting back in the day when VHSs were a thing and watching the whole game, because they brought it out as a thing you could buy. And what I always remember watching it was Liverpool scored 4 absolutely world-class goals, and Everton scored 4 scruffy goals. But it didn't matter, because the big news after it was Kenny Dalglish resigned and Everton won the replay. Just on it though, Keith, I think we we're similar age. I think we were a bit young at the time to know what it was all about. But anytime I ever heard anyone talking about this, they always go on about, oh my God, what a magnificent game. And it was coined game of the century at the time. And it was just, we've had a couple of derbies since which have gone into folklore and being entertaining. I think of the 3-3 Jordan Martinez, and even this season's one with the 2-2. But this was just unheard of, that a derby would finish 4-4. And it was just watching it. I remember watching as a kid, just an unbelievable game.
Yeah, I'm the same as you. I had the VHS of it and watched it like time and time and time again. And like you see, you spot on. They scored some ridiculous goals. The one John Barnes scores where he cuts in off the left and hits it right-footed and just like curls inches past Southall's despairing dive is like arguably for a neutral probably one of the best goals that's ever been scored at Goodison. It was an obscenely good goal, and it was just it's one of those. It's like two heavyweights just slugging it out, isn't it? Two like one in the prime as Liverpool still were at the time, and one that's coming to the end of their career as Everton were coming out the back end of the 80s, but still with a bit of fight left in them, and just going toe to toe for 90 minutes. And it's the quintessential derby match, isn't it? Blood and thunder.
It's one that I think is maybe not appreciated in modern day football because it was obviously so different back then. But it's an all time classic, and as I say, it's only a classic to us because we went on and won the replay. Pete McFarlane's joined us on the show as well. Pete, we're just talking about the category of the best derby at Goodison, and we talked about Andy King scoring the winner in 1978. We've just been talking about the 4-all FA Cup. I'm going to come to you and talk about, I know he's a big hero of yours, but we all remember that day in 1994 when we were firmly rooted at the bottom. Big Joe comes in and we face our biggest rivals at home. And I think everyone was nervous. Everyone was terrified. The fixture list didn't look promising. We were bottom by a big amount of points. And Neil Ruddock made the fatal mistake of angering Big Duncan Ferguson, getting him wound up. And then he duly steps up from a Hinchcliffe cross and headers it into the back of the net in front of the Gwladys Street. For me, that was the first real derby I can remember as a kid. And I just thought we were going to win every single derby we ever played. But that was some night, wasn't it?
It was. And I mean, funnily enough, when you were talking about like favourite derbies, one of mine was actually the one where Neil Ruddock scored an own goal and Callum Arthur scored the second. We won 2-0. So talking about Neil Ruddock winding Ferguson up was quite apt, really. But yeah, that was, as you say, I think we all felt that we were almost down and out at that point. I think we only won a couple of games all season. Now, we went before Joe Royle had come in. We were pretty much rooted. Didn't seem like there was going to be a way out for us, but that kind of gave us the springboard to kick on, and then obviously win the FA Cup, at the end of the season as well. So I think that, and also the legend of Big Dunc was made, wasn't it? And like you said, he was, or is, one of my all-time heroes. He was my hero as a kid growing up. Like everyone else, probably my age, everyone loved Big Dunc, but his story started certainly in that derby win. So that one for me will always, off the list that you've chosen, I think that would certainly be one of my favourites. And then I think, have you mentioned? Let me have a look at this short list again.
Just quickly.
Well, hang on.
Yeah.
Go on, Les, because you have a look, Pete, and Les, go on. If you make your points, I'll talk about a couple of the other mentions that we've got.
I mean, it was a case that we did feel down and out at that point, and I think they were just entering their Spice Boys era, weren't they? And they were full of it, and we thought we've got no chance here. But weirdly, beating them at the time at Goodison wasn't a massive deal. It was a big thing, like a derby win, but we kind of did it quite a lot around then.
We had a good record in the 90s, didn't we? Yeah, and especially under Joe Royle. I don't think Joe Royle lost the derby as Everton manager.
No, and I think the season before we beat them 2-0.
Mark Ward and Grobler and McManaman had the scrap, didn't he?
Yeah, just before that, Beardsley and Mo Johnson beat them 2-1. I think the season before that. So it was like, it was quite typical to beat them, but it was a game that gave us so much belief after, we'd taken quite a battering that season from everyone. We were a laughingstock because we'd gone and poached Mike Walker from Norwich, which didn't go down well with, whenever Everton do anything that any other club normally does, it's the worst thing in the world when Everton do it. So when we took Mike Walker, it wasn't looked upon well. So when he failed, like the pressing that they were made up. And yeah, so Joe Royle, it was that game, like instantly gave us a bit of belief back. Sorry, Pete, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say as well, it wasn't just that season. It was the season afterwards as well. Was that the season after when Chelsea scored at Anfield? We won 2-1.
Yeah.
And I think we drew 1-1 in the league as well. So yeah, it was a strange time that for me because we were unbeaten for so long at Goodison Park, weren't we, against them? And I think it was that McAllister one that eventually, when he scored and with like the last kick of the game, was the first time we've been beaten in about a decade.
Well, look, we won't talk about that because I want to go on to talk about a few more that happened in the 2000s. The first one was the Lee Carsley derby again, similar to Andy King in the way that we haven't beaten them for a long time. We were riding high in the league, and it was just coming up to Christmas, and we were thinking to ourselves, if we want to maintain where we are in the league, we've got to get a result here. And it was just such a brilliant Everton performance. And, you know, out of everyone who would have scored that day or could have scored that day, I don't think anyone would have had Lee Carsley as scoring the winner, and such a deserved person to score the winning goal, because he was brilliant for Everton for, I think, particularly during that season, but also a couple of seasons after. And then a couple of years later, we had the glorious Goodison Sunshine, and we tore them apart, where Andy Johnson scored 2, and as I mentioned earlier, Rayner put it on his head for them to score. And we thought we'd finally got the striker that was going to get us 20 goals a season for the next 5 years. But yeah, again, it was like you said, Pete, earlier, it was a little bit of a funny spell in the mid-2000s where we just didn't seem to get a result against them. And then, you know, just a quick word really on those 2 derbies, the Carsley and the Johnson one, and how it was during those times.
Yeah, Lee Carsley, I think again, that was kind of a bit of an important one for us, because at the time, I think we were just sort of narrowing the gap a little bit on Liverpool around then as well. Certainly under David Moyes, we had narrowed the gap, and we ended up having a few good seasons where we actually finished above them as well. So I think the Lee Carsley derby is right up there for me. And then the Andy Johnson one. I think Andy Johnson, that was one where, yeah, like you say, I think that was a good beating that they took that day. And I think we all floated out of that stadium, and yeah, Andy Johnson, he didn't do much else, but that was a great day. That.
Yeah, I hadn't seen many Everton performances where we physically battered them, and I think we did that day. Keith, moving on, a game I went to, it was actually, I didn't go to many of these derbies during my formative years, but I did go to this one. It was the famed FA Cup tie, where Dan Gosling scores the winner in the replay, which we know through, you know, those people outside the Merseyside watching ITV missed the goal for a Tic Tacs advert instead. But I remember going to this. I was in the top balcony with my nan, and I was just so nervous, thinking it was going to go into penalties. And they had this record in penalties where they always seemed to win them, and I was terrified of it going into penalties. And Dan Gosling steps up, and it took about 500 deflections before it went in, but it set us on our way to making the final that year. And what a wonderful, again, another wonderful way to win a cup. And I think the place just went off that night.
Yeah, I mean, fun story on that. So I was living up in the north of Scotland at the time, where I was based, and the ITV in Scotland is STV, and that didn't cut away to the adverts. So we, like up in Scotland, we saw it happen live, but for some reason in England, it cut away to the Tic Tac advert and then came back to the celebrating. So yeah, it was a bit of a mad one, wasn't it? I mean, they went down to 10 men, didn't they, late on in normal time? I can't remember.
Yeah, Lucas Leiva got sent off. Lucas Leiva and Gerrard got subbed for injury. It got subbed injury, and ITV made a big deal about how we celebrated Gerrard getting subbed more than we did.
Early, wasn't it? Didn't he come off injured in the first? He came off injured in the first 15 minutes or something, didn't he? And it was like
we'd had that mad spell where we played them in the league, and then we played them 5 days later in the first game in the cup, and then we had to play them in a replay. So it was like, by the time we got to that Goodison game, it was we'd had enough of them. Do you know what I mean? Not that, you know, you just didn't want to face them anymore, and we kind of had a bit of an edge on them because we were grinding out results and we were playing well, and we got that win. And as I said, it just set us on the way. And then again, we've had a few fleeting moments in between. Then we had to wait a long time before another victory, and you know, when Calvert-Lewin scored last year and Jared Brandthwaite, and I was tempted to put that one in, but I had to go, Les, for this season's one. It's the last ever derby at Goodison. I know we couldn't quite get the win, but I think if a night summed up Everton and what us fans are about and what it means to us, and the way that ball hit the back of the net with the most unlikeliest sources in James Tarkowski. I mean, what's been written about it, videos that have been made about it, you know, the little montages that people put up, you watch and you just go, yeah, if I want to pick Goodison in a moment, that's it right there, that goal.
Yeah, that's it. You know, it can get played down because, like you say, it wasn't a winner. It was just an equaliser, but it was a last-minute equaliser with a cracking volley at the street end by the centre half. It's like, it was just, that was the moment when I realised I'm going to miss Goodison loads, because up until that point, the season had been pretty drab. We'd had a couple of good away wins, really, hadn't we, when Moyes came in and he picked things up considerably. But the season itself had been drab. We'd not been very good at home. And it was just sort of petering out. And then that happened, and it was like, okay, yeah, that's what this place is, because it just went bananas, didn't it? And you know, we had the VAR check where everyone's panicking. Then it goes nuts again when the goal gets given. It was incredible. And like you say, you know, to put it in there against, you know, so that Ferguson one, that was the second derby I've ever been to. Second derby I've ever been to. That was incredible. Johnson, Carsley, because of the situations the club was in at the time. Like, you know, that was the Rafa Benitez one, wasn't it? The Carsley one. So there's a lot of these wins that are dead important. But for me, that was Goodison, and that was like a proper derby goal celebration. So yeah,
Beryl, wasn't it? Just like
it was just
obscene.
Yeah, it was. It was.
I think you've made I think you've made a compelling argument, even though it's not a win, for that to be the winner of the best derby, just because of what it meant being at that last one. I kind of do though want to go for a game where we've won. So I'm going to throw my name. It's got to be a win, hasn't it? I've got to throw my name in for Big Dunc. I think where we were at the time, Big Dunc's a big hero of all of ours, and we're all at that age where he came through at that time. I mean, that's my personal choice. I don't know if anyone wants to add their own derby in or whether they want to argue against that, but that would be my vote anyway.
I wouldn't argue with that.
I'd lean towards that as well, just because as the folklore about it as well. Like Duncan's first derby, Joe Royle
breathalyzed the night before and as well, famously.
48 hours before he's in a police cell, got drunk and drove through the bus station, and then he comes up and just absolutely terrorizes the Reds. And I think a lot of people forget about that game as well, because it's obvious, like everyone focuses on Duncan's header, big bullet header at the street end. It's such an Everton goal. But Rideout's finish in that game was an absolute beauty as well.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Really was. And I think a night game under the lights. Yeah, it was a night game because it was on Monday Night Football, and it changed the course of our season then, and then we go on and win the FA Cup. So yeah, I think for me that set the tone. We're going to go down the winner for the best derby. Go on, Les. Sorry.
Blue and black hoop shots as well.
Oh,
yeah. So there you go. So look, there we go then. The winner of the best derby at Goodison, Big Dunc and Ferguson, scoring in a 2-0 win over Liverpool in November 1994. On to the next category then. Now look, this one is best game, the best ever game at Goodison. Now, it goes without saying it's the Bayern Munich game. And I think we can all sit here and agree, even though we weren't, you know I wasn't born at the time and we weren't all there, but I think we can all agree that is Goodison's greatest ever game, for what everyone talks about and everyone says about it, and the goals on the night and what it meant for the club at the time and going on to win in Rotterdam. That is the best ever game, no doubt about it. But I wanted to talk about some of the games that have been maybe not forgotten about, but maybe not talked up as much, which were just unreal days at Goodison Park. So I've got, for your nominations for the best game, I've got the 5-0 versus Manchester United in 1984, the 4-1 Sunderland game in 1985, 2-0 against QPR in 1985 when we secured the title, 3-2 against Wimbledon in 1994, 1-0 against Manchester United in 2005, and the 3-2 versus Crystal Palace in 2022. Les, I do apologise for keep coming back to you for these older moments. I really do, but I feel like you can give us some I feel like you can give us some credence and some really good insight into some of these from the perspective of yourself. And obviously, you've mentioned, you know, speaking to your dad about these games as well. But the 5-0 Man United one in 1984, I put that in because I've heard some people refer to that as the most complete Everton performance ever. And I remember, I think somebody said it might have been Tommy Lawton. I think someone had said, or I might have that wrong, but in the director's box said, I've just witnessed the champions today. And he was referring to Everton watching that performance because we tore them apart and we played some wonderful stuff. And from the highlights I've seen, incredible goals as well. Yeah,
I mean, this is hands down my favourite. This is the first game I properly remember. Again, I go into this in Goodison Generations, if anyone wants to watch that. So basically, my first game was like in the August of that season, Tottenham 4-1 getting beat. I think this was the next game I went to, but it's certainly the first game I properly remember. So we'd gone in my dad took me in the top balcony for this one. Got there, that view of the pitch. It was a lovely sort of sunny autumn day, and they just ripped Man United apart, absolutely destroyed them. The thing that blew my mind, and I wrote about this, in school, in primary school, when you have a little news book that you write what you did over the weekend. In mine, I wrote about going to this game, Everton winning 5-0, and I drew a picture of Kevin Sheedy with his head bleeding, because when he scored that header, you think he goes up with Kevin Moran, and they clash heads, he goes down, header goes in, he gets carted off, stitched up and put back on the pitch. That blew my 7-year-old mind at the time, because it was like, how can you get a head injury, cut your head open and come back on? Kevin Sheedy as well, not renowned for being a bit of a hard man on the pitch or that. But it was just incredible, and it's a game that is just like etched on my memory, and it is. I was so made up when I saw that you picked this, because it's undoubtedly my favourite game ever. And a little bit more context. I didn't realise this at the time, obviously, because I was only 7. But Man United turned up to that game as favourites, title favourites, hands down. Everton had an okay start to the season, or Lane had a good end to the season before. But we're never touted as champions. We're never going to be title material. They were sort of part of the season before. They were in the relegation zone for a lot of it. So it was a bit like Leicester, Everton winning the title that season, because half the season before, although they finished 7th and won the FA Cup, they'd been in a lot of relegation trouble before Christmas. And then it turned round. But that was the game, I think, where certainly anyone who was aware at the time and cognizant of the, how good this Everton team could be, I think that was the game where they thought, what, we're going to win this title. And I think the team probably believed it as well, because it wasn't just beating them; they absolutely destroyed them. Brilliant.
I didn't realise this until I looked this up the other day, because obviously this was the year before I was born. But when you put this out the other day, and I was like, I had a bit of a read up on some of them. That was a week after the sharp volley at Anfield.
Yeah.
What an obscene,
so it just sets us up then
must have been to be an Everton fan.
Can you imagine?
Can you imagine how?
Can you imagine a week like that now, winning at Anfield, and then? Yeah, just moving on, Keith, to a few of the games later, and in that decade as well, and I've included the 4-1 Sunderland because I think it was like one of the games on Match of the Day at the time, and back then people remember Match of the Day didn't focus on every game; it was one highlighted game with a bit of highlights, and was the one picked, and you watch it, and I think, Les, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we went 1-0 down, and then that Everton team at the time, like, well, we're not getting beat. It was just that mentality of Everton will beat you. And we mentioned earlier about the Paul Bracewell pass to Trevor Stephen, the Reeds Cross Gray goal, the Gwladys Street looked magnificent that day when that goal went in as well. Everyone just seemed happy, and then following then, it led us on to the title win that we went on to get, and QPR, the 2-0 at home, and maybe not aesthetically the best game on the list, but that made us champions. So I've included them too. But just obviously yourself and myself weren't born, Keith, but them 2 games there and the highlights you've seen, it was Everton at its very, very best, wasn't it?
Yeah, and like you said there about like the Gwladys Street looking incredible. That was when they still had the big blue fences right along the front of the stand, wasn't it? And you just see everyone like up on the fences, giving it fucking loudly after Gray's goal, where he's scored about 2 inches off the ground. It's hard to like feel the real emotion of it, having not been alive at the time. But like, obviously, you watch the highlights of it, and you just think, that Everton team must have been special to go and watch week in, week out. Just can you imagine watching Everton and knowing that you're going to win, like going into a game and saying, yeah, we're going to win today? Like, I haven't felt like that in like probably since the first season of Martinez.
Yeah, I think for me, this is why I'm like eternally indebted to my dad. So how old was I? My dad was only 24 at the time when I was 7. So he was banging his heyday of going a game with his mates. But he still took me to quite a few games that season. Like sort of jibbed his mates off and took me and sort of introduced me to it. What a season to get introduced. Done me dirty there, didn't he? Yeah. But yeah, it was that team was just incredible. And you do have all the usual names and everyone knows that first 11. But then around that, you've got Kevin Richardson, you've got Alan Harper, players like that. Who, there was only one sub at the time, wasn't it? Who would come in, do the job, maybe get dropped the next week. Particularly Kevin Richardson if Kevin Sheedy came back in. It was just a complete squad. They could do everything. The defenders were brilliant that season. Derek Monfield scored 13 goals, I think, didn't he? The midfielder, Bracewell and Reid, was just incredible. The team literally had everything. And yeah, I do feel very blessed that I did get to see it.
Yeah, 2 games, Pete, as well on the list were scarily similar, and scarily things happened in the game in the 2 games that sort of mirrored each other, which was a weird thing. And whether you believe in fate or destiny and these type of things, it's funny how these things work out. And I'm referring to the Wimbledon game in '94 and the Crystal Palace game in 2022, both 3-2 games, both Everton. Both games, where Everton were 2-0 down, both against teams who at the time played at Selhurst Park as well. Just little freaky things like that. Both goals, the second goals for both teams, Palace and Wimbledon, iffy goals, like the Gary Ablett thing in '94, and then I can't remember who scored the Palace goal in 22, but just very weird.
It's Ayew, because he should have been sent off.
Ayew, yeah, very
very
to touch weird on that things that just
thing. Because we went 2-0 down, and I was at the game with Matt Flosk. He was on my lad's season ticket for that one. And
just before you tell the story, Keith, I've heard you tell this. I've heard you tell this before on one of the Blue Room shows, and it's a brilliant story. So yeah, you were at the game with our very own Matt Flosk, and yeah, go on. It's a brilliant story. So I just want you to tell it, because it is absolutely fantastic.
So obviously we've gone 2-0 down, and we're at this point we're all of the opinion that if we don't win this game, we're relegated, because we know we've got Arsenal the following week. And it wasn't even the following week. It was later in the same week, wasn't it? Go 2-0 down.
Yeah, it was the Sunday after.
On about, I think it was at half an hour in, and it was that Ayew who should have been sent off 10 minutes earlier for a scissor tackle on Anthony Gordon. Looking back, it was a fair tackle. He won the ball. But anyway, second goal goes in. I went, right, fuck this, I'm off. Said to Matt, I'm going for a pint. See you at half time. So I went down, sculled a pint in record time, got myself another one. I'm halfway through it. I'm finishing it off. Matt comes down. The halftime whistle goes. There's all boos. Everyone's trying to get on the pitch to ask the referee like his opinions on life and whatnot. And as Matt comes down, I'm in my head, I'm gone. I'm going back to the pub. I've left the ground, and I go to tell Matt that I'm leaving. And as he comes down the stairs, I clock him, and I'm like, that's me. And he just looked at me and just went, that second goal, bit Gary Ablett, wasn't it? And I looked at him and went, fuck, I can't fucking leave now, can I? I can't go now. And thank God he said it, because what a game to witness.
It's just funny. I just think it's so funny how these things work out. I really do. Yeah. And I mean, it's
that split moment. Like, I could have missed that comeback.
Yeah, it's frightening. It is frightening. Pete, yeah. Yeah, I missed it. Yeah, Pete. The Wimbledon game for me, it was that was the first season I started going, and I remember telling a story to Les, funnily enough, about how I remember seeing grown men around me cry at the end of that, because we'd stayed up, and as a kid, you're not used to seeing grown men cry. It's just not a thing that you ever saw, and it was the first time I really got what Everton meant to people. And then the Palace game, Pete, as well. The scenes after that, some of the videos that were doing the rounds, and it kind of makes you glad that social media and smartphones are the thing to capture it all. But just talk about the 2 moments and how similar they are, what it meant for Everton, and just we don't want to ever go through it again. But in some ways, it was the delirium of it all. There was a magical moment as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I think I'm convinced that Palace comeback doesn't happen if we didn't have that Wimbledon comeback. Because I just think that Evertonians, we've got this thing in us where, although, like what Keith sort of said then, the amount of times when I've been like, right, I'm off, I'm going to leave, and I don't. I stick around because it's always in the back of my head. Like in the same way that I know if we're 1-0 up with a minute to go, I know we're going to get beat 2-1. At the same time, if I know if we're 2-0 down in a relegation scrap, I know we've got a chance of doing something mad because it's Everton, and that's just how we are. We're just nuts. So I think the Wimbledon game, again, for me, it's burned into my psyche. So when it came round to like these last few years, these last few relegation battles we had when we stayed up against Coventry on the last game of the season, we're old hat at this. Having said that, though, that Palace game is the reason I lost the rest of my hair. Because I swear I've never, it's never recovered. It's seriously never recovered. I just remember, but like you say, there was like a bit of a crescendo build at that point as well with Lampard, and I loved Lampard for that, like, sort of. I still do. I still like the lad, but I think it was like lightning in a bottle where everything just seemed to sort of come together at the right time, and the right time being the second half against Crystal Palace, and we just went nuts. And it was like the flares getting thrown on everyone. When Calvert-Lewin, do you know what I loved as well? When Calvert-Lewin scored the third, and we're all going nuts in his flares and everything. I was looking back at the video I took myself of the celebration. People started going on the pitch then, but then they got booed because they were like, "Get off, because we don't want the game to carry on too long." Do you know what I mean? So everyone got booed off the pitch, and I thought that's Everton. That, but then the scenes at the end as well, just pure relief.
That is
it mirrored again that Wimbledon game, didn't it? And then we thought that's the last time we'll see anything like that again in our lifetime. And then we had Bournemouth.
Yeah, Bournemouth was a different kind of feeling at the end. I think we did turn more angry at the end of Bournemouth, and more, relief obviously as well. And then the final game in this category I want to mention, and for me personally, this was so special. I remember watching the highlights on Sky of this, and Arsenal were playing Chelsea at the same time, and I think they put all the big guns and the live, the live show at Stamford Bridge or whatever it was, Highbury, whatever. And we were the sort of second game, and we needed to win to sort of cement our place in the top four. And Martin Tyler was commentating, and whatever your feelings are about his commentary and how he is, I'll never forget he said that I was here the night of Bayern Munich. This is the closest thing, if not similar, to that night. When Duncan, he battered Rio Ferdinand that night. Don't forget as well, Rio Ferdinand was talked of at that time as the best English centre-half, and for England, alongside John Terry, the best, centre-back partnership. Duncan manhandled him that night, and he was petrified of him. And it was Duncan in his swan song. It was vintage Duncan. And when that header went in, I mean, we say limbs nowadays, and it's become a bit of a cliche, but the Gwladys Street again, classic header in front of the Gwladys Street. For me, that's up there with one of the greatest Goodison nights. But if we're going to pick a winner, I think I'm going to have to go with you, Les, with the 5-0, because I think outside of Bayern, that's probably the most complete Everton performance. Pete, Keith, any disagreements with that?
I can't argue with a 5-0 win at home.
I think you're on mute, Pete.
Against Man United as well.
Yeah.
So I can't argue with Les there at all. But I wasn't there for it, but that can't be argued if we're going for like an overall. My favourite ever Goodison game, personally, the best one I've been to, was that Duncan one, for atmosphere and for everything else. But that's because I missed the 80s, because I wasn't quite.
There's also
one in 86, missed it all.
Just on that game as well, you talk about the similarities between the 3-2 Wimbledon and Palace. There's the 1-0 Man United and the 1-0 Man United 10 years earlier, when Duncan does exactly the same down the street end. We beat them 1-0. It was an unlikely victory, well, a more unlikely victory probably back in 95, but there was that echo of that game again. There's a bit of, there's a lot of that.
For me, one of my...
Tyler's commentary again when he says Duncan Ferguson 10 years on.
Brilliant. One of my most quintessential Goodison things is a corner at the street end, or like obviously the 2005 was a free kick from the other side, but against United, it's just something so fundamentally Goodison about it. Especially like if it like the first game in 95, it's a spring game. There's a low sun in the keeper's eyes. it's perfect. It's so, and I've taken a few photos over the last few years of when we've played United and got a corner at that end, because it just looks, for me, that's what's burned in my psyche about Goodison in like another 40 odd years when I'm in a nursing home dribbling and like piss myself and stuff. When I think of Goodison, that's what I'll think of.
In swinging corners as well, by the way, Keith.
Yeah,
In swinging,
beautiful.
none of these
No.
outswing and woke nonsense ones.
No,
These
I'm
play
not having
short
an
corner,
outswinging
in
corner.
swinging, back post, get it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, look, I mean, outside of Bayern Munich, I think we're going to have to go with Leslie, and I think we're going to have to say for the most complete Everton performance, the winner of the best game at Goodison is Everton 5, Manchester United 0 in 1984. Now, I'm really looking forward to this next category because I think this is going to cause murder, both on this show as we record it now, but also online. If people listen to the show, I think people are going to want to have their say. The category is the best stand in Goodison, and obviously the nominations are the Gwladys Street, the Park End, the main stand, the Bullens Road, and the Paddock. It's a shame we haven't got Dave with us because Dave would have been the representative for the main stand. But I believe we've got representation for all of the stands here, because I know, Keith, you sit in the Bullens. Me and you, Pete, are in the Gwladys. Les, make your argument for the Park End as the best stand, please. Oh, are you main stand? Oh, well, there we go. We've got everyone represented. Perfect. Bite our corners. Les, go first.
Because it is the most cursed and most Goodison thing ever, the Park End. Obviously, it was the away end for sort of a lot of my formative years when it was just that one single block with a weird upper terrace and upper stand and a terrace down below. Then it got knocked down and it was built into the underwhelming structure that it is today. I remember the first game it was built, I think we played Aston Villa and we drew 2-2. And I was in the street end at the time, that's where I used to sit. Walked up and looked out there and it was like, that's a bit shit, isn't it? Because it's just not in keeping with any other part of the ground. But it is where all the old heads go. It is a sea of pink and silver. It is just the angriest place on earth. And it is, we all say, let's make Goodison angry again. Wouldn't have anywhere near the amount of anger without that proper horrible last stand. So there's my pitch for the Park End.
You've made the compelling argument yet again. Keith, I've also included the Paddock in with the Bullens Road, and I heard you quite eloquently say on post-match the other day just how vile and how vitriol and how visceral the Paddock can be, particularly when a referee makes a really bad decision or gives a yellow card when he shouldn't, and just how nasty and horrible it is. And if I can go serious for a moment as well, one of the things we've all wanted and we all talk about is the fact that when Goodison is on it, how intimidating it can be, because we're all on top of the pitch and the Paddock is left, right and centre of that. And I think, as you know as well, sitting in the Bullens has a lot of angry our fellas in as well, doesn't it? Make your case for the Bullens Road / Paddock, please, Keith.
I mean, I can't make a case for the Bullens, and especially where I sit, because it's too close to the away end and it's horrible. And it's, in a way, I'm going to be glad to be rid of it. And it's why at the new ground, I've picked somewhere where I can't even see the away end. After years of listening to do football in a library, I just can't be close to them anymore. The Paddock, I will make a case for the Paddock. The Paddock is Goodison's safe snarling section. It is hideous. It's vile. Can you imagine trying to be a linesman or lineswoman or assistant referee or whatever we're calling them these days in front of the Paddock? You'd be fearing for your life. And just to give an example of how good the Paddock is and how the Paddock can change the course of history in one moment, I'm going to take you back to Phil Neville's tackle on Cristiano Ronaldo, because that swarms outwards from the Paddock. That noise, that reverberation through the ground swarms out from the Paddock in like this hot, angry, vitriolic sound wave that just cascades across Goodison Park. And for me, it's just a beautiful place. The fact as well that it's completely uncovered and they all get piss wet through anytime there's a slight drizzle. Like that must just anger them more.
Adds to the anger.
Like that just adds to the fury. And I think it's deliberate. I think they left it uncovered just so that it was vile. So along my lines of make Everton horrible again, I present to you the Paddock.
Again, wonderful argument. Pete, the main stand probably isn't as vitriolic. Still got some angry people in there, like, don't get me wrong. But if we're talking about prestige, if we're talking about heritage, if we're talking about history, the first ever three-tiered band in the country, and probably in its day, one of the most amazing, incredible sights. I know when my first ever game, ironically enough, I was sitting in the Paddock when we played QPR back in '93. I could not take my eyes off that main stand and off that top balcony just because of the grand scale of it. Please, for ladies and gentlemen listening, make your case, Pete, for the main stand.
What the thing about the main stand is, it's a bit like, you know, if you live over the water, there's not much good about being there, no offense, Les, but the view is great. So, you know what I mean? You get that view of the skyline of Liverpool, if that makes sense. So the main stand's a bit like that, where I get to just observe all of the anger and all of the cacophony of just hatred that reverberates around Goodison Park. I also have the banging of the wooden seats. I personally have the cushion on my seat, but only a few rows back we've got the wooden seats. But one of my favorite pastimes, actually, going back to the Paddock, and I've said this before, but it's incredible. It's the Mexican wave of abuse as the lino runs back to the halfway line after a bad decision, and you can literally see it. And from my vantage point, it's both tiers, but the ones at the front, and it's amazing. It's literally in sync as they're going along. You know, you get the odd like bottle thrown at Luca Dean, for example, or that missed him. It's just, as I say, the main stand, for all its failures, for all its, you know, the fact that not a lot of people joining the singing, not myself not included, I always do. As I say, it's just in terms of an observation point, because you can see everything. I've got to give it that. Having said that, I had one game in the top balcony this season, first time I'd ever been up there, against Chelsea. It was 0-0, it was boring as fuck, but the actual top balcony is incredible, and I absolutely loved it, and I couldn't believe that in all my years going to Goodison Park, I love it. I went up there the other week when we were doing the setup for the Ipswich game, you know, with the confetti. I didn't want to get down from there. It was amazing. I just love it. I just absolutely love it. So, in fact, I go as far as saying, jib the rest off. Top balcony's the best.
Do you know what, Pete? I'll be with you on that. So Dave asked me the other day if there's anywhere you could sit in the ground, where would it be? And he was surprised when I said top balcony. But I think anyone who's been up there, it's like, oh my God, this is unreal.
Yeah, it genuinely is. And there's an
the only thing I don't like about it, because you get a great view. You get a great view up there. The only thing I don't like about it, you can see Anfield, and I don't want to see Anfield. That's me. That's me right against the top balcony. Yeah, that's it. I'm going to make the argument then for the Gwladys Street. Listen, it's the home of the most vocal. It's the home of many of the chants that start. It's where some of the greatest goals have been scored. Some of the sites, I heard Matt say on a podcast, or our own very own Matt Jones say on a podcast that I listened to recently, that it's an attack of the senses. The Gwladys Street is the attack of the senses. The sights, the smells, the noise, the people, some of the hardest, most loyal Evertonians that ever been in the game sit in the Gwladys. It's my show. I make the decision. The winner of the best stand is the Gwladys Street. Right.